On the day I adopted a dog, I thought I was rescuing a single soul. Turns out he rescued two. One was mine, the tired heart I'd been lugging through quiet apartments and louder nights. The other belonged to a man whose smile sounded like home. If you've ever wondered how a leash can lead you straight into love, this is our story. A tail-wagging, coffee-sipping, slow-dancing reminder that family often shows up on four paws. And he chose us first. If this warms your heart, please like, subscribe, and share. Comment your pet stories, and ring the bell for updates. The day I walked into the shelter, it was raining just hard enough to be inconvenient. The kind of rain that makes you tuck your chin into your collar and promise yourself you'll be quick. But nothing about that day was quick. I stepped through the glass door and was greeted by an old bulletin board with smiling faces of adopted pets, plus a handwritten sign that said, "Take your time." Hearts are choosing. The shelter lobby smelled like fresh coffee and lemon cleaner, and the volunteer at the desk had a sweater with tiny embroidered bones. Her name tag read Marisol. She said, "You here to meet your new best friend?" in a way that made it less a question and more a blessing. "I'm considering," I said, because I've always been careful about declaring big decisions out loud. But I'd spent too many evenings coming home to an empty apartment, arranging a takeout meal for one, and scrolling past other people's photos of sunlit hikes with paws and smiles. Somewhere in the bottom drawer of my kitchen, there was a leash that didn't belong to anyone anymore. I guess I was ready to belong again. Marisol led me down a corridor of kennels, where the sound rose and fell like an orchestra warming up. Some dogs barked at the exact same pitch and it almost made a kind of harmony. Others just watched, heads tilted, eyes soft, waiting to see if I might be theirs. We stopped at the end of the row where a dog with caramel fur and a heart-shaped patch on his chest sat as if he'd been expecting me. "This is Scout," Marisol said, scratching behind one of his ears. 2 years old, we think. Came in as a stray. Sweet as pie, but a little shy at first. He picks his people. He's picky in a charming way." "Picky?" I said, and Scout looked at me as if he knew the word. He didn't bark. He didn't bounce. He just leaned his whole self against the metal gate like he'd been saving up that lean since breakfast. "Would you like to meet him?" she asked. If my life had a soundtrack, it would have cued a warm swell right then. We went into a little room with a bench and a jar of treats, and they brought him in. He paused at the threshold, sniffed the air like a chef considering a stew, then walked straight over and placed his chin on my knee. He looked up with eyes that held 1,000 questions and exactly one answer. "Oh," I said, because sometimes the smartest thing you can do is admit surprise. "Hi, Scout," he sighed, a deep, thuddy sound that traveled from his chest to my own. And then he lifted his paw and rested it over my hand as if to say, "Steady now. It's going to be fine." Marisol smiled like she'd seen this 100 times. He does that when he thinks someone's nervous. We got him after a storm, so loud noises make him set his priorities straight. He'll check everyone's okay. He's a caretaker. "I see," I told her. Though what I was thinking was, I came here to take care of someone. And I found someone who wants to take care of me. The papers felt heavier than they looked, and the pen scratched like a promise. There were questions about fences, about work hours, about whether I believed in training with kindness. I checked yes with such force it nearly tore the page. When they clipped a red adoption tag on his collar, Scout glanced up at me like we were signing a mortgage together. We walked out into the rain with Scout wearing a blue bandana that said, "Adopted," in cheerful letters. He placed each paw carefully, choosing his path, glancing back to make sure I was following. This, I learned later, was how he moved through everything. Deliberate, gentle, with a surprising burst of speed if someone he loved needed him. It was like living with a quiet guardian who also snored like a tiny motorboat. At home, I showed Scout the hallway and the couch, the bed he could share when he was ready, the bowl that would always be full when he needed it. He crouched by the window and tracked the tails of cars as if reading a new book. I took the leash from the drawer, the old leash I couldn't throw away, and buckled it to his collar. It fit like something finally understanding itself. Scout ate his dinner with the focus of a scholar. Afterward, he brought me a sock from my laundry basket and placed it on my lap like a peace offering. "I'm touched," I told him. Also, we're going to talk about boundaries. He thumped his tail, and I understood that boundaries might be a conversation we'd have again. That first night, I heard a low woof from his corner. He was dreaming. His paws twitched, and I whispered, "You're home, buddy," even though I wasn't sure if I was telling him or myself. I had a habit of waking around 3 a.m., thinking of things I'd said wrong or not said at all, of voicemails that never came. That night, I woke up just once. Scout lifted his head, placed it on my arm, and settled again. It turns out co-authoring sleep is a kind of love. In the morning, the sun arrived like a friendly neighbor on the porch. We learned each other's rhythms. I made coffee. Scout sat beside the counter like a gentleman, waiting for his cue. When I said walk, his ears perked, and when we stepped into the cool air, he took small, polite steps until he knew my pace. He sniffed the lilacs, said hello to a retired mailman named Harris, who always carried spare biscuits, and we both stood for a while watching a child draw a spaceship in chalk. Part of me hoped the world would stay this quiet. But one afternoon, needing to socialize Scout and myself, we tried the dog park. The place hummed like a community picnic. Dogs bustled past with joy stitched into every step. A boy threw a tennis ball so earnestly it felt like a prayer, and a scruffy terrier stole it mid-air. I unclipped Scout's leash with both caution and faith. He took 2 steps out, then turned and looked at me. "Go on," I said. He trotted toward a puddle and inspected it like a surveyor, then lifted his head, ears tilting in a question. When he spotted a guy tossing a frisbee for a border collie, Scout stopped, watching in that serious way he had. The guy's laugh came a half-second before his face, a warm sound like a porch light turning on. "Want to try?" The guy called over, and I wasn't sure if he meant me or Scout. He walked closer, frisbee in hand, wearing a faded T-shirt that said, "Good Boy University," with a cartoon diploma. His hair did that thing where it looks like it meant to behave but forgot around the ears. He had the kind of eyes that catch on what's important and don't let go. "Only if you grade on a curve," I said. "I'm new. He's new. We're new together." "Well," he said, eyes crinkling, "you enrolled at the right time. I'm Ben." He crouched to Scout's level, letting Scout do the sniffing. "And you're a thoughtful guy, I can see that. No pressure. We move at your speed." "Scout," I said. "He likes to deliberate. Does he like liver treats?" Ben asked. "Do you like money?" I said, and Ben laughed again. He offered Scout a treat hidden in his palm open, gesture gentle, like offering a shell to a child at the shore. Scout took it, then leaned his head into Ben's hand, sealing the deal. "Told you," Ben said, looking up at me. Thoughtful. He's picking his team. We spent the next 20 minutes tossing the frisbee in careful arcs, each throw a measured conversation. Scout didn't chase it. He watched, then walked toward it as if appreciating the concept. The border collie swooped in and returned it triumphantly. Scout wagged, maybe in approval of delegation. "I volunteer at the shelter some weekends," Ben said, standing beside me as the dogs ran. "Saw him there once. He had that thing, like he's listening to the bigger story." "I'm still learning the plot," I admitted. "He adopted me yesterday," Ben smiled. "Congratulations. That's a big yes. I tell you this now. There are moments when you can feel the ground agree beneath your feet, when your life, that had been walking alone like a single melody, finds a harmony line. It's not fireworks. It's a steady, settling nod, like a park bench you didn't know you needed until you sit down. We added the park to our routine. Mornings, we'd take quiet streets where the sycamores arched overhead. Afternoons, we'd meet at the park where the dogs taught us patience. Sometimes Ben brought coffee. He drank his black, which seemed brave. I took mine with cream until it was the color of Scout's fur. We talked about small things first. Trainers who swore by clickers, the way dogs could learn your dreams if you slept near them, whether the city would ever fix that pothole on Maple. Slowly, small things made a bridge toward bigger ones. We talked about my job at the library, about the way people whisper even when they don't need to. I told him how I liked the regulars, the man who always checked out woodworking books but confessed he built nothing, the teenager who read romance novels with the covers tucked inside textbooks like secret gardens. He told me about his work designing playgrounds and dog runs. "I like measuring joy," he said, and he said it like a fact, not a slogan. We didn't rush. I didn't ask for phone numbers right away. He didn't either. The park became a place where we showed up at around the same time, somehow always, in a way that felt less like scheduling and more like weather. Scout and I began training classes because I wanted us both to learn a common language. The class was held in a community center gym with a glossy floor that doubled as a roller rink on Fridays. There were posters of dogs doing tricks, and a lady named Glenda, who ran class with a whistle and patience. "Focus," she would sing, tapping her own forehead. "We reward what we want to see." It was a sentence I understood in every way. One week, Scout mastered sit like he'd invented it. The next he decided down was optional. He would look at me and then make a small circle with his paw, as if offering to do a different trick instead. "He's negotiating," Glenda said. "He's a diplomat. Pay him in cheese." On the third week, I saw Ben across the room, carrying a bag of extra leashes and an easy grin. He was there as a volunteer, it turned out, helping newcomers feel less lost. "You again?" he said, as if we were both pleasantly surprised. "Scout insisted," I said. He made the calendar. Ben knelt beside Scout, who immediately placed his paw on Ben's knee like an old friend. "You ready to impress the world?" Ben asked him. "Small steps, big heart? That's the motto." When Ben brushed my hand to pass me a clicker, something fluttered in my chest, quiet but unmistakable. I'd felt attraction before, sure. But this was something tempered and slow, like the way bread dough rises on a windowsill. It wasn't impulse. It was potential deciding it was welcome. It was a couple of weeks later when we finally did the thing people do: exchange numbers. It didn't happen at night with neon signs and a dare. It happened at the park when Scout's leash somehow wound around my hand and Ben's. We laughed like kids caught in a game and then paused, not untangling immediately. "I'm around most afternoons," Ben said softly. "So am I," said. "And sometimes mornings. And occasionally late, if Scout can convince me we need stargazing." "Stars are part of the curriculum," Ben said. "Mostly for humans." He typed his number into my phone, and I typed mine into his. He labeled me Michael and Scout, which made me feel like a team. I labeled him Ben Parks and Joy because I liked the way it read. He didn't correct me. We didn't leap straight into dates. We moved like Scout, choosing our path with care. We sent small texts. A photo of Scout sleeping with his tongue out. A picture of a playground slide shaped like a whale. A link to a song that sounded like Walking Home. We discovered we liked the same diner where the waitress calls everyone sweetheart and sets down coffee refills unasked. We found we both cried at movies where the hero lives but has to choose an ordinary life. We admitted we both had histories that left us careful around certain corners. One Saturday, we planned a proper walk along the river trail. The day arrived crisp and bright, with wind that made Scout's ears lift like little flags. We walked side by side and somehow also together, and when the path narrowed, our shoulders touched. Ben told me about the time he tried to build a treehouse for his cousins and ended up inventing a rope swing by accident. I told him I once organized a senior book club around the theme Second Chances and how it changed the way I shelved my own stories. At a bend in the trail, we found a bench with a plaque that read, "In memory of Al and Joe, who loved to sit." We decided to honor them. Scout draped himself across both our shoes. Ben's hand found mine in that way that happens when you're both reaching for the same word. We didn't say anything profound. We just sat, and the river said the things we couldn't. It was around then that life reminded us it likes to test new structures. The 4th of July approached, and our neighborhood is the kind that believes in fireworks the way some people believe in curfews, not as a suggestion, but a sacred ritual. I'd been prepping Scout for weeks with YouTube videos of fireworks at low volume, treats paired with booms, soft blankets in a den I made under my desk. I thought we were ready. We weren't. The first crack sounded like a door slamming in a dream. Scout lifted his head and looked at me. And I said, "It's okay." The way people in movies say, "Don't look down." The second crack came, then a rapid string of pops, and then the sky did its bright, loud trick. Scout looked me right in the eyes, apologized for what he was about to do, and bolted. It took me half a second to realize he'd slipped his collar in a panic. The door was closed and the windows shut. But in the chaos, he darted into the hallway when my neighbor opened her door to see what was happening. By the time I reached the sidewalk, my heart ahead of me, he was a streak of caramel heading toward the park, a guest of his fear. "Scout!" I called, and my voice came out cracked. I ran. And if you have ever run with your heart in your mouth, you know that your feet can do only so much. I texted Ben with shaking fingers. Scout bolted. Fireworks. Heading toward park. He responded in 1 second, and then, as if he'd come out of the ground, he was beside me in 5. "Okay," he said, and the calm in his voice was a raft. "We divide and call. He knows your whistle. I've got treats. He likes the bridge, right?" We fanned out, calling his name in all the tones that say, "It's okay," and "I'm sorry," and "please." A few people with lawn chairs joined our search party with the ease of a town that understands emergency. A teenager on a bicycle circled the far field. A woman in a sun hat said, "I saw him go toward the path," and pointed. And I wanted to hug her, but didn't stop running. We found him under the bridge, where the sound was less sharp and the shadows felt like safety. He was wedged into a corner, not whining, not crying, just small. When he saw me, he didn't rush. He didn't fling himself with relief. He pressed his body as flat as it could go and waited for me to become slow enough to trust. I took a breath that hurt and dropped to my knees. "Hey, buddy," I said, and my voice found its softness. "I'm here." I'm sorry that was loud. I should have known. I stopped, because apology can be its own noise. "I'm here," I said again. "Can I come closer?" Ben stood behind me, far enough not to crowd, close enough to be a wall if I needed one. He knelt too, rested his hand on my back warm and steady. "You're doing great," he murmured. "Keep everything small." "Everything okay?" It took a minute. Maybe it took 10. Time was a bottle with no label. Scout let me inch forward. He sniffed my fingers like he was reading a note left in his locker. When I finally touched his shoulder, I did it the way I wish every person had been touched the first time they were afraid, with a tone that said, "This hand knows your name." I slipped the leash back on, this time clipped to the harness I had tucked in my pocket for emergencies I had hoped would never come. My small, practical act felt like the bravest thing I'd done all year. We walked home together in the lull between explosions, the 3 of us. When we reached my building, my neighbor with the porch light on had a bowl of water waiting. She said, "Bless his heart," and it blessed us all. Inside, Scout crawled under my desk, then slowly, gradually came back out and chose to press his head into my lap. He sighed. I cried in that quiet way where tears go down but your breath stays even. Ben sat beside us and put his arm around my shoulders like he was one more blanket. "Thank you," I told him, every syllable heavy with the thing beneath it. "You did the big part," he said. "You went slow. You stayed." "I want to be the kind of person who does that," I said. "You already are," he said, and then, because life also likes timing, the fireworks paused. Silence draped over us like a truce. In that hush, I turned my face and we kissed, soft as saying hello to your own life. It wasn't fireworks. It was better. It was the feeling of a light being turned on inside a house you'd forgotten you owned. In the days after, Scout stuck to me like a thoughtful shadow. We made a new plan. We found a trainer who specialized in desensitization to noise. We practiced with pots and pans, softly, then higher. We rewarded every calm breath. We created a game out of thunder. We taught him that booms meant cheese. There are some things you can't fix. There are many you can soften. Ben and I began to knit our days together with tiny stitches. He came with us to the vet for vaccines and brought a pocket full of the expensive treats that smell like someone's cooking something on Sunday. He helped me buy a proper harness and didn't roll his eyes when I picked the one that looked handsome. He offered to fix the small wobble in my kitchen table and then, halfway through, said, "I think it's perfect just this way," because it was the table where Scout sat beside me when I had my coffee. And some rickety things are worth keeping as they are. We had our first dinner at my place. I made pasta that I'd practiced, the kind where you put basil on top like confetti. We played records for ambiance and then turned them off because conversation sounded better. Scout lay on his rug, head up, eyes tracking us with approval. After we'd cleaned up, we sat on the floor like teenagers at a sleepover, sharing stories of our first crushes and our first heartbreaks and the quiet, durable ways our families loved us even when they didn't have the right words. When I told Ben about a previous love that ended like a book without a last chapter, he squeezed my hand. "We're writing a different kind," he said. We went slowly meeting each other's people. I introduced him to my co-workers at the library, who measured his worth quickly and correctly by the fact that he helped a lost little boy find the right shelf of dinosaur books while his mom took a breath. He introduced me to his sister, who lives one town over and bakes cookies that taste like December. She told me, with a mischievous grin, he was the kid who cried when the school goldfish died and then gave a eulogy. Ben rolled his eyes and then admitted it. One Saturday in early fall, when the leaves on the big elms were the color of Scout's fur and the air smelled like cinnamon from the donut truck parked by the farmer's market, we went on a little day trip out to a nature trail. Scout wore a new bandana that said Adventure Supervisor. We walked until our calves noticed, then spread a blanket and split an apple. We read out loud to each other from a thrift store paperback of Mary Oliver poems we'd found for a quarter. Scout flopped across our shoes and chewed a stick like it owed him money. "When did you know?" Ben asked after a while, looking at the sky through the leaves. "About adopting Scout?" I asked. "About everything," he said. "Scout and me and you. I thought about it. There wasn't a single cinematic moment. No lightning bolt. It was a series of small nods, Scout leaning his head into my knee. The way my apartment felt less like a waiting room and more like a home. The way Ben's laugh arrived just before his face. The night we sat under that bridge when panic could have turned everything brittle, and instead it turned us into a we. "I think I knew when I realized I didn't brace for silence anymore," I said, "when the quiet felt full instead of empty." "That's good," he said, turning his head to look at me. "I knew the day I watched you cut Scout's toenails. You were so patient with the first two, and then you decided to stop before he got nervous. You said, 'We'll try again tomorrow,' like T.S. Eliot. I didn't know Eliot wrote about toenails," I said, and he grinned. "He would have if he'd had any sense," he said. We laughed, and something in me settled. I had spent years thinking love was a race against loneliness. But there, with the leaves applauding and the dog snoring gently, I understood that love is not a race at all. It's a walk. You stop for water. You share snacks. When something shiny crosses the path, you point it out. When a boom sounds, you stand still together and count to 10. Life was not all soft edges, of course. There were days Scout refused to get into the car because he suspected a bath. There was the time he stole half a sandwich from the coffee table and looked so proud of his acquisition that I had to turn around to hide my laughter. There was a week when I got a cold and slept on the couch with a box of tissues as my pillow. Scout nudged my elbow with his cold nose whenever my breathing got weird. Through it all, Ben showed up not as a savior, but as a steady. He brought soup. He learned how I like the blankets arranged. He learned that on hard days I appreciate company more than solutions. I learned how he drinks water before coffee, like a human plant, and how he hums when he calculates angles in his head. One evening in December, we went to the shelter's holiday event. They decorated with tinsel that somehow didn't look tacky, and they had a photo booth where you could pose with your pet in antlers. Scout refused the antlers with dignity, but accepted a scarf. We talked to Marisol, whose sweater had little snowmen this time. Well, she said. "Looks like Scout made a good pick." "He's got taste," Ben said, hooking his arm through mine. I felt warm in a way that had nothing to do with the hot chocolate. They had a board on the wall that said, "What did you adopt this year?" People wrote answers: compassion, laughter, a running buddy, a reason to get up in the morning. I picked up a marker and wrote, "Family." Ben added an ampersand and wrote, "Hope." Scout, if he could have written, would have probably written cheese. The new year arrived. I woke up on January 1st to the sound of rain doing its steady drum on the window, and Scout's nose pressed into my arm. Ben was in the kitchen, making coffee in my slow, stubborn machine that needs a kind word to work. His hair was a soft mess, and he wore my old sweatshirt. He looked over and said, "Happy," and I said, "Also new." We didn't make a list of resolutions. We made a list of habits. Walks at sunrise when the world is kind. Gratitude out loud, even for small things, especially for small things. Apologies sooner than later without the but. laughing at the same joke no matter how many times we've told it. Treats for Scout just because. Spring came in yellow and green, and the trees applauded again. I started seeing the city in a different way. The cracked sidewalks became memory maps of every time Scout had decided to sit down and consider a dandelion. The grocery store parking lot was where Ben once twirled me in a slow dance because a song came on the car radio that he said required movement. The bench by the river where Al and Joe loved to sit became holy ground. We left little flowers there once. It felt right to add to their company. In May, we went to visit my mom. She lived 2 hours away in a small house with a porch and a wind chime that sang softly like a little choir. She stepped onto the porch as we pulled up and her hands flew to her mouth when she saw Scout. "Oh my goodness," she said, as if nobody had told her dogs existed and she was thrilled by the discovery. Scout, who can be shy with new people, walked up, sniffed, and then did an astonishing thing. He climbed one step and placed his head gently against her knee. My mother's eyes got shiny. "You've got a good one," she said, looking at me and at Ben, and I knew she meant all three of us. We sat on her porch, drank lemonade that she insists is special because she adds a tiny pinch of salt, and told the story. How Scout leaned against the kennel gate, how the fireworks taught us how to stay, how Ben joined us under the bridge without fanfare. My mother listened with the focus of a librarian, which she once was. "Love is often a team sport," she said. "People talk about falling in love like it's tripping over a rock. But sometimes it's like learning to row. You catch the rhythm. You pull together. You stop splashing each other by accident." On the way home, Ben squeezed my hand at a red light. "Your mom is a sage," he said. "She once settled a family argument by handing everyone ice pops," I said. "Hard to yell with a popsicle in your mouth." Summer brought heat and the particular joy of laundry drying in 1 hour. With the warm weather came a litter of puppies at the shelter, all plump bellies and tumble steps. We visited not because we planned to adopt another dog, not yet at least, but because watching Scout with the puppies was the contentment equivalent of a weighted blanket. He would lie on the floor while they climbed over him, their little mouths on his ears, and he would close his eyes like a saint. "I'm not crying," Ben would say, wiping at his eyes. "You're crying!" We both were. "There's a tenderness you can't fake, and you shouldn't try." We took a short vacation, the three of us, to a small cabin by a lake that rented to well-behaved pets and their humans. On the first day, we hiked a loop trail that promised wild blueberries and delivered. On the second, it rained the kind of warm rain that smells like sidewalks remembering they were once sand. We read on the porch, Scout curled like a comma at our feet. At night, we grilled corn and listened to the frogs. It's not that there were no mosquitoes. There were mosquitoes. They loved Ben. He told them to take a number. On our last day, we walked to the dock as the sky turned the color of apricots. Ben took my hand, and Scout sat between us like a very proud chaperone. "I didn't plan any speeches," Ben said, "because honestly, Scout gets nervous when there's too much ceremony. But I want to say this, I love you. I love coming home to your coffee smell in the morning and your book smell at night. I love that you check the weather and pack an umbrella with the same seriousness you once reserved for heartbreak. I love that you've let me be a person who needs and a person who gives, and both feel like me." I felt my throat go tight in that way where my childhood self wanted to say, "Me too," with a nod. "I love you," I said. "I love that you build places for joy and then remember to use them. I love that you measure kindness like it's the right unit. I love that when something scary booms, you do not grab. You stand near. I love that you treat my dog like an equal, which, for the record, he is." Scout wagged as if to say, "Correct." We started talking about the practicalities of being a we, not a wedding yet, though we joked about Scout as our efficient in a tiny tux. But we merged a shelf of books and a drawer of socks. We learned that I load the dishwasher by geometry and Ben loads it by poetry. We learned that both work if someone says thank you afterward. We learned that if we both leave our shoes by the door, Scout will choose to sleep between them, as if he's guarding the threshold. It was fall again when something small and lovely happened. I woke up on an average Tuesday and realized that the apartment no longer had corners that felt unused. There was a jacket of Ben's tossed on a chair like the start of a story. There was a chew toy tucked under the coffee table like a secret. There was a plant we'd accidentally kept alive by talking to it. There was a calendar on the fridge with 3 names on it. Mine, his, Scout's, underlined by the word movie night. We did at last have a little ceremony. Not a legal one, not yet, though that would come too. We hosted a gotcha day for Scout at the park on the anniversary of his adoption. We invited the people who had become our circle. Marisol with her sweaters, Glenda with her whistle, Harris the retired mailman with pockets full of biscuits, my mother with lemonade in a thermos and a sack of napkins, Ben's sister with cookies shaped like tiny bones. The kids from the neighborhood came because there was a promise of sidewalk, chalk and a dog who would sit on command when you said please. We hung a banner between 2 trees that read, "He adopted us," and under it, Ben set a little table with photos, Scout in the bandana, Scout asleep with his tongue out, the 3 of us under the bridge, our faces smudged with relief. We took turns telling stories about Scout. The time he barked just once at the vacuum cleaner and then decided it wasn't worth his breath. The way he leans in for hello like a stoic uncle. The way he looks at you when you're sad as if to say, there are at least 3 reasons to continue: food, walks, and the sound your book makes when you turn the page. Marisol made a small speech with a paper cup in her hand. Rescue is reciprocal, she said. We say that a lot, and it's not just a nice phrase. We bring them home, and they bring us home right back. This guy, she pointed toward Scout, who was investigating a dropped piece of cheese. This guy is a minister, a therapist, and a stand-up comedian. Good pick, everyone. We passed around a collar charm shaped like a tiny heart. Each person held it for a moment, thumbs rubbing over it like a wish stone. When it reached me, I closed my hand and felt its cool, small weight. I thought about the first touch of his chin on my knee in that room with the treat jar. I thought about the bridge. I thought about blueberry fingers and morning coffee and the days we made better by showing up. When it passed to Ben, he held it and met my eyes. The whole world felt like it narrowed in a good way, to the 3 of us standing there with lemonade and laughter and the people who had chosen us and whom we had chosen. We clipped the charm to Scout's collar. He shook his head, testing, then accepted it without drama. That's the thing about dogs. They don't overcomplicate ceremony. They accept love in installments, immediately, and with interest. It's been a while now. We've had more seasons, more walks, more small victories like the day Scout didn't flinch at thunder because we were playing a game where booms mean cheese and also dancing. I've watched Ben fall asleep on the couch with an open book on his chest, one hand in Scout's fur. And I've had the thought I hope everyone gets at least once in their life. I am so glad I stayed long enough to have this day. On the wall by our front door, there's a framed photo of the 3 of us in the kitchen. It was taken by a friend who came over on an ordinary Sunday morning. In it, I'm flipping pancakes. Ben is stealing a bite of one. Scout is looking at both of us like a coach might look at a team he's proud of. When people come over and see it, they smile. Sometimes they say, he's such a good dog, and I'm never exactly sure which he they mean. I think the truth is, all of us are some days, and on the days we're not, we have each other to lean on. If you're listening to this wondering whether to adopt, whether to try again, whether to take a chance on a life that isn't the one you planned, I won't pretend it's simple. There were forms to fill and schedules to rework and a couch that will never again be free of dog hair. There were nights we whispered in the dark about the things that still scared us. But there was also the morning Scout learned stay for real, and Ben clapped softly like he'd won a prize. There was the afternoon I found a note in my lunch bag that said, "You're doing great," in Ben's handwriting, and Scout had added a paw print by stepping on it. There was the day my mother called to say she'd taught Scout a trick. He would put his chin on her knee when she said, "Tell me about it," and she would say, "I'm listening too." Connections multiplied like laughter. Sometimes, when the world seems too much, too loud, too fast, too insistent that love must be grand gestures and algorithms. I sit by the window with Scout at my feet and watch the ordinary miracles. A neighbor helping another carry groceries up the stairs. A kid teaching a smaller kid to tie a shoe. Ben coming in with leaves in his hair because he was measuring a new dog run by the river and forgot where he'd placed his hat. The way Scout stands up and does a little stretch when he hears the key in the lock and then trots to the door like a parade of one. I adopted a dog. He adopted me. And in the space between those two sentences, a life unfolded that I would not trade for any plot twist in the world. If you'd asked me before that day with the rain and the lemon cleaner and the kennel line, I would have told you I was fine. I had routines. I had a Bluetooth speaker with playlists for every hour. But I didn't have two sets of footsteps pacing the floor, a laugh that arrives before a face, a quiet weight against my shin that says all the words I don't say well. I didn't have a reason to walk in the snow on purpose, just to watch paw prints make patterns. Now, when I come home, the light seems to turn on a little brighter. The space has edges that fit me. There are shoes by the door, just where we left them. There's a treadmill of a washing machine running a cycle that always includes at least one dog towel. There's a stack of books with a slip of paper sticking out of one that reads, Chapter 6 is Us, because in that chapter, two people and a dog sit on a bench and decide that this is enough. And also everything, it's not the ending. It's not even the middle. It's an ordinary day. Scout lifts his head at the sound of the mail sliding through the slot. Ben calls from the kitchen, "Do you want toast?" And then he adds, "I made extra," because he knows my coffee is stronger than sense. I say yes. Scout thumps his tail, a steady, sensible beat. Outside, the world does its world thing. Inside, we do ours. We are steady as a bench, bright as a porch light. We are the small, durable kind of happy you don't brag about because it doesn't need bragging. The thing about adoption is that it isn't past tense. It happens every morning, every time we choose again. When Scout leans his chin on my knee before breakfast. When Ben squeezes my shoulder as he passes me a plate. When we walk to the park and wave at a kid who's learning to ride a bike and his parents who are learning to let go. When we pass under the bridge and I feel a pinch in my chest, then a spreading warmth as I remember how we stood there and learned to be the quiet in the noise. We head out for our evening walk. Scout chooses the left at the fork today, and that's fine. The sky is pink in a way that makes you wonder whether the world practices for moments like this. Ben pockets his hands and bumps my shoulder with his in a greeting that still makes my stomach do that kind, familiar flip. A breeze lifts Scout's ears. Somewhere, someone is grilling. Somewhere else, someone is skipping. Right here, we are simply moving forward at a speed that suits us, 3 heartbeats in easy rhythm. I'm proud of him, Ben says, nodding at Scout, who is ignoring a squirrel with the restraint of a monk. And of us. Me too, I say, and it's as big as any poem. We stop at Al and Joe's bench. We sit because tradition matters. Scout climbs across both our shoes and looks at us like he wants to be sure we're both paying attention. We are. We always are now. It doesn't take much to keep love's attention, it turns out. It takes showing up. It takes kindness. It takes the occasional liver treat. The sun slips lower. Lights blink on. Somewhere nearby, a kid squeals at a firefly. Ben leans over and kisses the top of my head. Scout sighs, a deep, thuddy sound like a promise renewing itself. And that's our evening. Just 3 souls, part of a small, soft parade. If love is a house, then a dog opened the door, a man held it, and we walked in together.